Rain hammered the tin roof of the forward outpost, each drop echoing like distant gunfire. Mud streaked across the concrete floor, the air thick with sweat, diesel, and nerves. 12 Navy SEALs crowded around the operations table, coffee cooling beside maps marked with red X's and faded ink lines. Lieutenant Aaron Cole stood at the front, posture steady, explaining the route through the Mindanao jungle. His voice carried calm authority until a dry laugh cut through it. "Backup?" Major Robert Kane leaned against the wall, arms folded, a smirk tugging at his mouth. "You won't need it. It's 15 farmers with rifles." A ripple of unease passed through the room. One SEAL muttered under his breath, "He's never been outside the wire." Kane ignored it. "We've got an observer nearby." Army. Just eyes, no trigger. The remark drew a few low chuckles. Someone whispered, "Figures." In the corner, Staff Sergeant Maya Rourke said nothing. Her uniform sleeves were rolled tight, her rifle case propped beside her chair. She just watched the rain slide down the window, calm, distant, and unreadable. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? She arrived at the Joint Task Force compound before sunrise, when the generators hummed low and the air tasted like wet iron. Staff Sergeant Maya Rourke signed the weapons log with a calm hand, took the tan case that never left her side, and found an empty bench beneath a corrugated awning. She sat with the habit of someone who had spent years waiting without wasting time. Maya was 32. Average height, wiry strong, quiet as a kept promise. Her sleeves were rolled just enough to free her wrists, not enough to invite questions. The case snapped open with 2 soft clicks. Inside lay a bolt-action rifle in separate, immaculate pieces, wrapped in oiled cloth like instruments in a field surgeon's roll. She treated each part as if it had a name: bolt, receiver, barrel. She inspected the lugs, checked headspace, ran a patch that came out clean. No rush, no hesitation. Her breath matched the rhythm of the rain. By the time the compound stirred, voices, boots, the smell of powdered coffee, her rifle lay assembled and dry, glass-capped, sling adjusted to her length and no one else's. The SEALs moved through in a loose cluster, a dozen men who knew each other's jokes and scars. They didn't know her. That wasn't a problem. It was the point. She was temporarily attached to the Joint Task Force for a window of operations, assigned overwatch on a recon creep into jungle that swallowed radios and people. "Observer, huh?" one of the men said, not unkind, not kind. "That army?" another smirked. "Babysitting binoculars." Maya kept her eyes on her torque wrench, clicked it once, then twice. The scope ring settled just right. She spun the elevation turret a quarter turn, felt the stops, came back to 0 and logged it in a small grease pencil notebook. No facial flinch. No shoulder lift. People believed quiet was agreement. It rarely was. The compound rubbed its eyes and put on its war face. Pallets of water bottles, tarps, fuel drums. The ops tent glowed with map light, blue and green pins bristling from laminated overlays. Radios crackled with traffic that said nothing and meant everything. It would be hot as soon as the sun thought about rising. Southern Mindanao in the wet season had its own gravity, air pressed down with a lazy crush. Insects droned even when you couldn't see them. The jungle was a wall until it became a maze. Trails turned to soup without warning, and tree roots knelt where you didn't expect them. A half-kilometer could take an hour if the rain made the leaves into blades and the mud into glue. Maya took the weather sheet from the clerk and scanned the columns. Barometer drop. Convective showers by late afternoon. Wind light and variable terrible for long shots, worse for smoke. She folded the sheet and slid it behind her data card, already laminated, and punched to her sling. She had learned to shoot on a Montana ranch where fence lines drew horizons and distances were measured by chores. Her father had a way of correcting without raising his voice. "Don't bully the trigger," he'd say. "Ask it." She hit tin cans first, coyotes later, far paddocks last. She learned to count wind and the way cotton leaves spoke, and how heat made air wobble like a lie. Recruiters got her at 18. Iraq taught her to read walls. Afghanistan taught her to read mountains. A mentor taught her to cut noise from the shot process until only 4 things remained: position, sight picture, breathing, break. Break clean. Break honest. The blast took her spotter on a road that looked like any other. One moment they were 2 voices in a net of voices. The next she was alone with the quiet that follows a thunderclap. She did not bleed on the outside. After Kandahar, the Army said words like resilience and recovery. She let the words roll past. She filed a reassignment request nobody argued with. Observation duty only. Observation could be a refuge. It could also be a test. She logged more hours behind glass than most people log behind steering wheels. She learned the angles of roofs and the language of dust plumes. She learned to recognize a man about to pick up a rifle by the way his shoulders forgot to be casual. She learned how to wait until the truth proved itself. The new unit knew her as a name on a roster and a call sign penciled on the whiteboard. The SEALs saw a woman who didn't speak up, cradling a bolt gun instead of a semi, no combat patch on that sleeve. The jokes were not cruel. They were the standard currency of men who had risked the same things together and did not like IOUs from strangers. "Hey, observer," one said when he passed her bench. "If you see me trip, delete the footage." "Copy," she said. "No trip." "Ha." Good answer. She could let barbs pass through her. It was a learned skill, like correcting a wind call without cursing the wind. Eyes down, and steady, mind on the work. She checked parallax at 50, then 200. She taped her dope for the day to the inside of her wrist. She tightened her cheek pad a half inch because humidity swelled everything that could swell. Captain Dana Liu brought coordinates printed on a curling sheet. The captain was brisk and even. She smelled faintly of lavender soap, a detail Maya filed and then forgot. "Insertion at this grid," Liu said. "Overwatch here." She tapped the map with a finger that bore a thin gold ring. "We're expecting small unit signatures. You'll have eyes on the North Ridge and the approach to the collection site." Maya traced the contour lines and put the terrain in her head: saddles, spurs, dead ground where men disappeared between ridges. She sketched on a 3x5 card, likely ingress, probable egress, fire lanes, no-go zones. She asked the question she would have asked even if she knew the answer would irritate someone. "Do we have an exit plan if contact exceeds 20 hostiles?" Major Robert Kane drifted close as if drawn by the gravity of caution. His smile had edges. "You planning for failure already, Sergeant?" She looked up, met his eyes for a single beat. "No, sir. Planning for everyone to come home." Someone at a nearby table let out a thin whistle. Another smirked. Kane's smile didn't change much, but it hardened. "Your observation only," he said mildly. "Eyes, no trigger." "Understood," Maya said. She did not add the rest. That "understood" didn't mean agreed. She tucked the card into her notebook, the one with a photograph wedged into the back cover. 2 soldiers squinting into a Kandahar sun, his arm across her shoulders. The edges were worn soft from being handled, then handled less, then handled again when silence insisted. She took a knee on the gravel and adjusted the bipod cant tension. The compound loudspeaker barked a garbled brief about fuel deliveries and a water ration. She could feel the day's heat coiling up from the ground. Radios hissed with the rhythm of operations that would begin whether anyone was ready or not. Across the lane, one SEAL ran a rag over the action of his carbine and said, not looking up, "Where'd you qualify, Rourke?" "Benning," she said. "Figures," he said, as if Benning were a punchline. "You guys love your rulebooks." "I like results," she said, and went back to her scope caps. The insects didn't care who was in which branch. They whined with the manic persistence of tiny engines. The jungle outside the wire had a smell that wasn't just leaves. It was rot and blossom, iron and mildew, sap and old smoke. When the rain pressed down, it brought those smells out of hiding and rubbed them in. She reviewed the medkit in the side pouch, counted the pads and chest seals and the slim tourniquet that had saved more than one person who hadn't expected to need it. She checked the spare bolt. No one carried one until the one time they wished they had. She tightened the sling loop and dry-fired once, twice, slow as prayer. A young Air Force weather tech walked past, did a double take, and said, "Ma'am, do you really write your own wind tables?" "Only the ones I'll need," she said. "What if the wind doesn't cooperate?" "It never does," she said, and the tech looked amused and a little older before he left. By mid-morning, the compound was awake enough to pretend to be efficient. Briefings stacked against one another like cards. Maya stood at the back of the SEAL tent while Lieutenant Aaron Cole pointed at a map with a chewed pen. He spoke in clean lines, time on target, formation, pace, listening halts. Men nodded the nod of professionals who would later make 1,000 micro-decisions no map could anticipate. Cole's eyes found Maya once while he talked. Not a challenge, more a measure. She gave him the smallest nod. It was all they had time to trade. When the meeting broke, one petty officer bumped her shoulder and said under his breath, "No offense, Sergeant. We just don't know you yet." "Understood," she said. "You Army snipers really that patient?" "Sometimes," she said. "Sometimes we're not." He grinned despite himself. "Fair." Captain Lou handed her a fresh radio. "Primary is channel 3, she said. "Back up on 6. If we lose both, we go to time and action." "Copy," Maya said. She clipped the radio where habit demanded and ran a finger along the antenna to feel for cracks. None. Kane watched from the doorway. "Remember the ROE," he said lightly. "Your trigger is ornamental today." "Understood," she said again, because the net had rules. The jungle did too, and not all of them were written down. She shouldered her pack, felt the weight seat into the hips, not the shoulders. The sling rode flat between the blades. She tested her footfall on the wet concrete. Outside the wire, the concrete ended and the earth began to argue. She rolled her ankles, felt the boots give where they should and hold where they must. At the gate, a Filipino sergeant checked passes with the bored professionalism of a man who had done this longer than anyone had meant him to. "Mahalo," he said as a habit to all foreigners. Maya nodded, though the word belonged to a different island chain. Some habits traveled well. The jungle waited like a held breath. Radios hissed. A helicopter thumped somewhere far off, the sound losing itself in cloud. Maya paused by the threshold where gravel turned to damp soil and took one slow look at the tree line. Not for drama. For respect. She thought about the question that had rubbed Kane the wrong way. 20 hostiles and then what? In her mind, she drew a line from the Overwatch perch to the SEAL route, then a second line to the nearest high ground with an escape cut. She pictured the angles, the lanes, the folds of land that would hide muzzle flashes. She pictured the worst number and asked herself, again, what she would do if she saw it. "Do we have an exit plan if contact exceeds 20 hostiles?" she had asked. "You planning for failure already, Sergeant?" he had said. "No, sir," she had replied without heat. Planning for everyone to come home. The answer wasn't bravado. It was a calibration of ethics, of duty, of the narrow place where orders and responsibility sometimes refuse to shake hands. She tightened her sling once more until it pressed like certainty into her shoulder. Then she stepped into the green. The jungle closed around sound. The air thickened. The mission clock began to tick where no one could hear it, and the quiet that had followed a blast years ago settled on her again. But this time it was something she chose. Quiet to listen. Quiet to see. Quiet to decide when it mattered. The convoy rolled out before dawn, headlights covered, engines low. The sky was more shadow than light, and the jungle around Mindanao seemed to hold its breath. Boots sank into wet ground, the rhythm steady but cautious. The SEAL team moved in a line, rifles up, eyes scanning through the fog. High above them, on a narrow ridge nearly a kilometer away, Maya Rourke lay prone beneath a camouflage veil. The air around her smelled of moss and rain-soaked bark. Every breath she took was measured. The world narrowed to the black ring of her scope and the pulse in her fingertips. Comms check. Lieutenant Aaron Cole's voice came through, faint under static. Solid copy, Sierra 9, she replied. Falcon 9 in position. Before she could finish logging the frequency, another voice broke in. You see anything, Eagle Eye? Or you still calibrating that camera? It was Petty Officer Ryan Carter, the team's point man, half joking, half testing. She let the silence stretch a heartbeat too long before answering. Still here, still watching. Roger that, he said, laughter bleeding into the line. The humidity thickened, and so did the tension. They were 30 minutes from target grid 7 Alpha, the supposed insurgent stronghold. Maya adjusted her elevation dial, calculated the range again, and rechecked wind direction. The math didn't lie. The jungle was alive with movement. Through her thermal scope, faint white silhouettes flickered, dozens, maybe more. She tracked one group, then another. They weren't random patrols. They were converging. Then Major Robert Kane's voice cut in from the operations center miles away. Remember Overwatch 9, he said, his tone oiled with command. Your observation only. Let the real operators handle contact. Maya's thumb rested against the safety. She exhaled slowly. Understood, sir. Below, the seals fanned out through vines and ankle-deep mud, their movements blending into the terrain. A low mist rolled across the underbrush like smoke, swallowing the horizon. 15 hostiles, Kane had said. But through her scope, the heat signatures kept multiplying. 3, 7, 12, then 20 more. She counted carefully, eyes steady, pulse steady. 40, 45, 52. Her stomach tightened. She keyed her mic. Sierra 9, confirm enemy contact approaching from northeast, 50-plus hostiles, grid 7 Alpha. Lieutenant Cole's reply was instant. Say again? 50? Affirmative. 50 confirmed by thermal. Silence filled the radio. Then Kane's voice snapped through. Negative, Overwatch. 9. Intel confirmed 15 max. You're reading thermal ghosts. Hold your position. Sir, these aren't ghosts, they're moving in formation. I said, hold your position, Sergeant. Do not engage. Continue observation. The line clicked dead. For a few seconds, all she could hear was the rain softening the world. Then the jungle shifted again, this time with intent. Figures moved between tree trunks, rifles slung forward. She watched muzzle flashes flare briefly like fireflies. Down below, the seals froze. Cole whispered into the radio, Falcon 9, are you seeing this? Affirmative, Maya said. You're being flanked from the east ridge. Recommend fallback 50 meters south. Kane broke in again, irritated. Cole, maintain course. Those readings are phantom reflections off rain saturation. Keep moving. Cole hesitated. His team looked to him, eyes searching for certainty. Maya could almost feel their doubt through the static. She wanted to shout, but soldiers didn't shout into command nets. The seals pushed forward anyway. The first explosion came without warning, a blast of orange light that tore through the tree line. Mud and smoke rained down. The jungle screamed alive. Automatic fire erupted in all directions, tracer rounds slicing through leaves. Maya's heart slammed once. She pivoted the scope, locked on to the muzzle flashes, and started counting trajectories. 3 enemy squads, closing fast. Cole's voice burst through the radio, sharper now. We're under heavy contact. Multiple directions, requesting confirmation on enemy numbers. Kane's reply was immediate, but empty. Negative on large contact. Weather's distorting signal. Hold position and assess. Sir, we're pinned. Hold. Position. Maya gritted her teeth. She watched through the glass as men dove for cover. One seal went down, hit in the shoulder. Another dragged him behind a tree, blood streaking across the mud. The radio went wild, half words, static, overlapping calls for status. She adjusted magnification. The enemy was within 200 meters of Cole's position now, moving in a semicircle. Not random, trained, coordinated. The type Kane swore didn't exist here. She pressed her mic again. Command, this is Overwatch 9. Confirm 50+ hostiles converging on friendly position. Grid 7 Alpha. Request immediate support or extraction. Kane's tone turned icy. Sergeant, if you don't trust your commander's intel, perhaps you shouldn't be out there. Maintain protocol. You are not authorized to call support. Cole's voice cut in, breathing heavy. Major, with all due respect, she's right. We've got more than 50 guns lighting us up down here. The pause that followed was unbearable. Finally, Kane spoke. Negative. Proceed as planned. Maintain discipline. Overwatch, hold your fire. The channel went silent again. Maya blinked rain from her lashes. Through the lens, she saw one of the SEALs, Torres, she thought, dragging a wounded man. Another was firing short, desperate bursts into the darkness. The air was thick with steam and gunpowder. The SEALs were laughing less now. No more jokes. Just clipped commands, bursts of fire, the strained grunts of men realizing they might not make it out. The swagger had drained, replaced by something colder. Rain came harder, a curtain between her and the chaos below. The sound of it filled her earpiece like static, drowning out half the transmissions. Cole was shouting something. She couldn't tell if it was to his men or to God. She exhaled, centered the reticle, scanned the ridgeline again. The hostile movement was clearer now, pairs bounding forward, leapfrogging through the fog. She counted 47 still moving. She tried once more. Command, this is Overwatch. 9. Confirm massive hostile presence. I have positive visual IDs. You need to. Enough. Kane's voice snapped through the mat like a whip. Sergeant, you will remain on observation or face immediate suspension upon return. That's an order. Maya froze, her thumb resting against the safety again. She wasn't afraid of reprimand. She was afraid of being too late. In the jungle below, Cole shouted over comms, "We're boxed in, requesting backup." "Repeat, requesting backup," static answered him. The sound of distant thunder rolled across the mountains, or maybe it was mortar fire. Maya couldn't tell anymore. Her pulse matched the rain's rhythm. Every instinct told her this was spiraling out of control. Her duty told her to wait. Her conscience told her 12 men were about to die, while someone 30 kilometers away debated rain reflections. The radio hissed again, faint but steady. A young SEAL's voice panicked, barely hidden. "We've got movement on all sides, north, east, and west." "Can anyone copy?" Maya's knuckles whitened around the rifle grip. She could see them now, tiny silhouettes through the green haze, ducking, firing, scrambling for cover. She could pick out Cole by his steady motion, his command hand gestures amid the chaos. Kane's voice cut through once more, too calm for what was happening. "Cole, weather interference is severe. Maintain position until visibility improves." "Visibility's fine where I'm standing," Cole roared. "They're everywhere." Kane didn't answer. Maya adjusted focus again. 2 hostiles crawled toward the SEAL's flank, carrying RPG tubes. She tracked them, breath steady, crosshairs centered. Her finger found the trigger, then hesitated. Orders were orders. She had broken them once before and buried a friend because of it. The first rocket exploded near the tree line. The concussion shook her scope. She blinked twice, refocused. Torres was down again, arm bleeding, shouting, but alive. Cole keyed his mic, voice ragged. "We're being overrun, I repeat. Being overrun." "Where's our support?" No answer. Rain and gunfire merged into one endless roar. Maya pressed her lips together, voice low. "Falcon 9 to Sierra 9. I've got you in sight. Sit tight." "Copy," Cole managed. "We're not sitting much longer." She shifted position, nudged her bipod deeper into the mud. Her right knee ached from the pressure, but she ignored it. Through the scope, she caught another squad moving in from the north. 8 men, rifles up. The rain blurred everything for a heartbeat, and when the drops cleared, she could see Cole's team pinned behind a fallen log, 3 men firing, the rest shielding the wounded. The voices on the radio were different now, lower, clipped, the kind that comes from men running out of time. "Magazine empty." Torres hit again. Where the hell's support? Kane's last transmission came thin and dismissive. Sierra 9, QRF, is 45 minutes out. Maintain defensive posture. Overwatch, maintain visual only. 45 minutes. Maya knew what 45 minutes looked like in a firefight. It looked like smoke and silence. Her breath fogged against the scope. She counted again, almost mechanically. 51 hostiles alive, 30 closing, 21 fanning wide. Every number was a sentence. She keyed her mic one final time. Command, you've got 50+ active contacts engaging friendlies at Grid 7 Alpha. You need to act now. Static. Then, Sergeant Rourke, that's enough. The rain drowned out his next words, and maybe that was mercy. Down below, Aaron Cole shouted for ammo redistribution. His voice was calm, but his eyes, through her lens, were fire. The team was trapped. And still, no one came. What would you have done? Obey a voice 30 kilometers away, or trust what your eyes saw through glass? Maya lay still, every sense sharpened to a point. The decision hung there, balanced on the edge of a trigger pull and a heartbeat. The jungle around her breathed in the storm, waiting for someone to make the first move that would change everything. The ridge took the rain like a confession. It came in steady sheets, pinning leaves flat and turning the soil to a quiet, sucking grip. Maya lay beneath a drab poncho that broke her outline into a bump of earth and shadow. Water threaded off the fabric, dropped from the brim of her boonie hat, and tapped the rifle barrel with a metronome's patience. She did not move more than breathing demanded. Chin settled into the stock. Cheek weld set. Left hand cupping the rear bag. The world inside her scope was cleaner than the world outside. No smell of wet bark, no grit on the teeth, just a round window of truth edged in black. Every few minutes she eased her focus, scanned with the naked eye, then returned to glass. The routine was a prayer she did not name. Scan, check, listen. The jungle spoke in layers, rain on leaves, rain in mud, rain on her poncho. Somewhere far off, a branch snapped and did not echo. That mattered. She rechecked the range to the North Ridge, 900 and some change by map, 880 by her last stadia pull. Wind was a rumor today, shifting low, then not at all. She made a pencil note, crosswind negligible, heads on a swivel. The paper drank the graphite and curled, as if it too was tired of being wet. Her bolts cycled with a quiet, oiled authority. Brass slid into her palm. She trapped it to keep the sound from bouncing. When she fed the next round, the faintest engraving near the trigger guard caught a smear of gray light. R. Jensen, never missed twice. The letters were shallow and personal, not factory neat. Her thumb pressed there once, like touching a name on cold stone. She broke position only as much as she had to. The small, weathered notebook slid from her chest pocket, cover darkened from years of rain and thumb grease. Inside, the pages were a cartographer's discipline and a mourner's keepsake, grid sketches, elevation notes, a hand-drawn compass rose that always pointed to home. Between two pages, a photograph had been living so long, its corners had learned the shape of the book. Two figures in desert camel squinted into a Kandahar sun. His arm was around her shoulder, her smile was the kind she did not give to cameras. A black pen had written the truth in the white margin, Kandahar 2015. She did not look at it long. Memory was a place to visit sparingly when it rained. As she closed the notebook, a sliver of color slipped free and fell into her palm. A folded ribbon, its sheen dulled by dust and sweat. Silver Star. Unofficial, the way some acts live better in silence than in speeches. She refolded it once and tucked it back between the pages where it could be weight and witness without needing to be seen. The rifle's glass came back to her eye and the world contracted in a way that calmed her. Scope steady, reticle floating with breath, the edges of the image dark and familiar. Distant movement printed in ghost white against foliage through her thermal men, not yet ready to be names, but already too many to be dismissed. The first faint crackle of gunfire wandered up the valley like a rumor that would soon become a headline. It was small arms at range, not yet urgent, but not training either. She listened with the part of her that measured more than sound, rhythm, spacing, the way bursts stitched a line or threw wild. The bursts were purposeful. Purpose had direction. Her radio hissed with rain noise. She rolled the volume a fraction higher until the net sorted into layers she recognized. Cole's voice low and clipped, a medic's breath rising and falling between words, the sharp edge of someone trying to sound calm for someone else's sake. Beneath all that, dead air waited like a road no one wanted to take. She adjusted a half-minute of elevation, not because she needed to yet, but because readiness could be a comfort. The pad of her finger found the serrations on the turret and felt each click as a promise that steel would move where she told it to. The safety lever sat under the first crook of her thumb, sleeping but available. Rain traced the rifle's barrel in thin, quick streams. The water hung in a bead at the muzzle, shook loose, formed again. She thought about mirage and heat shimmer and how different kinds of weather lied in different ways. Today's lies were about sound and distance. Today's truth would be about numbers. She breathed in for 4, held for 4, out for 4, then let her lungs decide the rest. The glass showed her the north slope, then the saddle, then the shadowed seam where a drainage cut became a path for boots that didn't belong. When she shifted to the west, the frame lit with 3 quick flares, muzzle flashes curtained by rain. She counted to herself as she had counted fence posts as a girl. 1. Supply. 3. Pause. 1. 2. She set her cheekbone back into the weld, so exactly her skin found the same cold seam in the stock. When she blinked, the seam stayed there on the inside of her eyelids. It was good. It meant she was not missing anything when she needed to blink again. The radio caught a breath before it caught words. Sierra 9, this is Echo 2, a SEAL said, voice thin with distance, not fear. Single contact north. Could be scouts. The line clicked. Another voice layered in, trying for humor and missing by an inch. You see anything, Eagle Eye? Or you still calibrating that camera? Still here, she said, steady as a plumb line. Still watching. Copy, he said, and the laugh that followed had less air in it than before. She slid her hand along the stock, not to pet it, but to check for the tiny vibrations that said something was loose. Everything felt like it should. She nudged the rear bag a whisper to the left. The reticle returned to the place on the ridge where a man would stand if he thought a tree could keep him secret. A burst of static smudged the next transmission, and then Major Kane's voice arrived, polished and certain. Overwatch 9, confirm you understand your role for this operation. Observation only. Let the real operators handle contact. She did not answer the way her gut wanted her to. Affirm, sir. Observation. Below, the jungle composing itself around men and intent began to play louder. A distant shout rode the rain and died somewhere trees could not carry it. She saw a pair of heat signatures stop and kneel as if to pray, then raise tubes to their shoulders. RPGs in a place Intel had called too primitive for doctrine. She marked their positions with 2 pencil dots on the edge of her card. The dots bled slightly, as if the paper wanted to make the mark bigger than she did. The first tube belched light. The concussion arrived a half-second later and shook rain from leaves like confetti for a ceremony no one wanted. Muzzle flash, north, she said into the net, not raising her voice, not lowering it. Recommend, shift south 50. Static clawed at her ear. Cole's reply came ragged, but intact. Copy, Falcon. We're taking fire. Moving. Somewhere between those transmissions, the jungle stopped pretending this would be small. Gunfire layered over gunfire until the spaces between were shorter than the shots themselves. The pattern of it said, 3 squads at least, maybe 4, leapfrogging with the muscle memory of men who had done this in other counties with other uniforms. Her pulse did not race. It settled, the way water finds a level. Calm was a choice and a habit. She picked it again and let it sit. The reticle drew lazy circles as she found the next likely lane of approach. The circles shrank as her breathing did what she told it to. She was not the person her new unit thought she was. She was not a tourist with a long lens. The engraving under her trigger guard had been given to her by a spotter who had teased her about how careful she was until careful became the difference between a life and a folded flag. Never miss twice, he had said, when a bad wind stole one good shot, and then he had died where the map called a road. Maya blinked the thought back into the book where she kept it. The rain kept time. The scope kept its story. The ridge told her everything she needed to know if she used the right questions. Another page of the notebook flipped with a twitch of wind, and a corner of silver and scarlet peered out. The ribbon that had been pressed into her palm with a private nod and a public nothing. She had said no words then either. Saying them wouldn't have changed what the ribbon meant. Today, it meant wait without noise. The gunfire's echo learned a new shape, the short cough of a machine gun settling into a lame. She found the source by the rhythm before the thermal confirmed it. 880 meters. Wind still a rumor, drop predictable as she needed it. She did not need it. Not yet. Her radio cracked wide open. Command, Sierra 9, in contact. 3 down, pinned on North Ridge. The voice was Aaron Cole's, iron wrapped in cloth. He was not asking for permission to be in trouble. He was naming a fact. Overwatch 9, hold fire, Kane answered before she could key her mic. Observation only. Her finger tightened slightly on the trigger. No slack taken up, just the knowledge that it could be taken up without thought when thought was a luxury. She breezed out and let the rain be the loudest thing, just for a second. She moved her scope 3 degrees and saw a man she did not know raise a pistol and signal with 2 fingers, the way men signal when they have drilled enough to do it without meaning to. Behind him, another man shifted weight like a sprinter in the blocks. They were not ghosts. They were not 15. They were coming. She keyed the mic, voice the same temperature as the rain. Sierra 9, confirming your contact. I count multiple elements bounding. Recommend smoke south and break right 10. There was no time for thank yous on nets like this. Copy, Cole said, breath hitching, then gone again into a world of his and his men's making. The jungle spread an arm over the valley and pulled sound close, hoarding it. Her poncho shed water like a patient roof. Her hands did what hands do when they have held 1,000 shots and let 999 of them go. She watched, she measured, she listened. A second voice on the net tried for calm and landed on warn. We need help, it said, and then someone else shushed him in a way that sounded like care. Overwatch 9, this is command, Kane said. Maintain position. Do not fire. QRF en route. 45 minutes. A beat. Say again, observation only. Her mouth dried a little. She tasted metal. 45 minutes was a number with a body count attached. She shifted her right elbow a half-inch to stop a tremor the cold had started and the will had almost hidden. The reticle steadied until it seemed drawn there by a drafter's hand. The rifle was part tool and part truth-teller. It would put a thing where she drew a line if she let it. The question had never been whether she could. It was when she should. The rain made a sound like paper tearing far off. Another rocket arguing with a tree. Someone screamed once and did not do it again. Her radial filled with breath, then words, then orders, then clicks, like a heart monitor jumping, then flattening, then jumping again. She drew a slow breath in and let it count for her. 1 for the man who had written the engraving. 1 for the man who had placed a ribbon in her hand and told no one. 1 for the 12 men she could not reach except through a circle of glass and a choice that would not be undone once made. Command, Sierra 9 in contact. 3 down, pinned on North Ridge, Cole again louder, like maybe volume could push signal through rain. Overwatch 9, hold fire. Observation only. Kane's voice had not changed. The rain had not taught it how. Her finger settled into the curve of the trigger as if the metal had been cast around it. Muscle memory walked to the edge of action and waited there, toes on the line. The world inside the scope held steady. The world outside tried not to fall apart. The next sound would decide which world she answered to. The jungle detonated into sound. An RPG punched a hole through the canopy, and the world lit for a breath orange bloom, the smell of burnt sap, leaves shredded like paper. Men shouted in a language made of short commands and guttural curses. The SEALs went from formation to survival in the space of one heartbeat. Maya's scope painted the chaos in clean lines. A man squad leader, by the way he moved and by the little star on his shoulder, stepped out to rally his men. He was silhouetted against a smear of smoke, gesturing with the flat of his palm. The first shot slid into him just behind the ear, the kind of surgical death that let the rest know the rules had changed. There was an almost ceremonial calm to the way she worked. Breathing, settling, exhale on the break. It was a small private ceremony that sent echoes through a public war. She tracked an RPG gunner who had been crouching behind a tree, broad shoulders, green scarf. He lifted the tube like a man lifting a torch. Her second shot punched through the flesh of the tube and the man with it, and the tube sagged with a wet, unreadable sound. A third report cut a machine gunner in half. His belt of ammo folded and jutted like a wound in the green. The sound of that gun falling to the ground was heavier than all the earlier laughs in the ops tent combined. For 30 seconds, the jungle's noise was replaced by a metronome of rifle cracks, each one a punctuation point that kept a sentence from ending on a body bag. Down below came a single voice, half scream, half laughter, as if disbelief needed company. "Who the hell's firing?" someone shouted. "Overwatch," answered another one of Cole's team, voice small with gratitude. "She's covering us." The Met lit up like a small town at night. Kane's voice broke in, metallic with authority, the tone of a man who thought rules were the same as good judgment. "Cease fire." "That's an order," he barked, the order slicing through static to the places where hope was trying to grow. Maya's hands did not shake. Her thumb had already moved from safety to trigger without telling her mind, an act faster than argument. She keyed the mic, voice low because low kept her from being loud enough to get flinched at, and said, "Order acknowledged, hostile leader neutralized." It was a sentence that bent the rules into usefulness. She did not mean to be defiant as much as necessary. The choice had been made in the same way she decided where to put her bipod, by calculation and the internal arithmetic of risk and consequence. The rifle was an extension of that calculation. Each shot was a lesson in physics and memory. She adjusted for wind that never meant to be neat, for humidity that crouched like a secret, for the arc the round would make over moss and low branches. She sighted not just for center mass, but for effect. Drop the leader, take the machine gunner out of the equation, make the RPG operator useless. Her rounds did that work. The jungle made blunt objects of trained fighters when she put them in lines. She heard Cole then, closer and clearer, "Falcon 9, whoever you are, keep doing that. We're pulling back." The sound in his voice was gratitude shaped into orders. Men who had been pinned found the breath to move. A wounded SEAL Torres was dragged by 2 hands as the rest provided covering fire. The momentum shifted like the tide. Kane's fury threaded across the frequency in another command to cease. It was louder now, angrier, laced with the impotence of a man who could not see through the rain. "Sergeant Rourke, I am ordering you to stand down. That is a direct order." Maya's response was a measured thing. "Sir, if I stop, they die." A short beat then, quieter. "These are Americans." There was a pause that felt like a world deciding whether to forgive itself. Below, the SEALs used that pause to rearrange survival. Cole called coordinates for a fighting withdrawal, and the team began to move with the kind of practice chaos that only comes when training finds purpose. Men fell, hands gripped, boots found purchase in the mud. They were not graceful, they were functional. The machine of a unit rebuilding itself mid-dismemberment. Shells thudded into trees up the ridge and sent down a gravel rain. The smoke bent light into greasy colors. Through it, Maya kept finding targets. An automatic rifleman who had slaughtered himself into a foxhole. A man running with ammo slung like a bandolier. An insurgent trying to shoulder another rocket tube. Each time, she calculated angle and time and let the rifle answer. Her magazine went lighter, and the metallic clack as she cycled rounds started sounding like a conversation she wished were longer. She whispered a count into the mic mechanic things to ground herself. 2 mags left. 2 0 rounds from the left flank. The Met acknowledged in breathy tones, A medic called out in the background asking for trauma kit distribution. She fired in measured groups, double taps for high-value targets, single shots for those whose moment of exposure was small. She watched the ripple effect. One man went down, another broke, communication faltered among the attackers. Confusion spread through the hostile ranks faster than the rain. Where leadership fell, the formation loosened like a seam unstitched. The SEALs pulled a wounded man behind a boulder and set him down. Blood darkened his sleeve, bright against mud. A medic's hands were already on him, automatic, practiced, a map of actions that might save a life. The team's center held because someone from a different branch had decided not to be ornamental. Over the net, voices changed. Cursing turned to a quieter register. Thanks, muttered in between commands. Get him to cover, Cole said. Get the leg wrapped, a man answered. On it, we owe you one, whoever you are. Maya's scope caught where the RPG team had tried to reconstitute. One moved to pull another up, and she put 2 rounds in the dirt at their feet, one to shatter and one to teach. The second round sent dirt spitting in an arc that looked, for a heartbeat, like confetti. Then a sharper sound cut the air. Kane again, but now with legal language and consequences threaded through it. Sergeant Rourke, you will be subject to investigation. You understand there will be repercussions. Maya did understand. She also understood what the medic's hands looked like around a tourniquet. She understood what a child's face would look like when a father did not come home. The arithmetic was brutal and simple. She weighed reprimand against lives and let the weights tip. Do what you must when you get here, sir, she said. I'm keeping them alive until you can prove otherwise. There was a sound on the net like a man trying to find a word that would hold. It did not come quickly. In the lull, a SEAL's voice cut through the strain with something raw. If anyone asks, say it was the wind. A tired attempt at humor drifted and collapsed under the atmosphere of bullets and rain. A muzzle flash near a fallen log drew Maya's eye to a new cluster of movement. She tracked, led for the run, adjusted for humidity, and fired. The result was a cascade. An enemy machine gunner slumped over his weapon, the belt of rounds folding into a heap that looked like dead teeth. The suppression was real. The SEALs took their chance and moved. When her spare magazine clicked empty, she did what snipers sometimes must. She changed position. Standing would have made her visible. She moved like water, a series of practice shifts from prone to a curl behind cover, dragging the rifle, keeping the reticle in the conversation until the moment she could not. She loaded another magazine by touch, thumbs finding rounds in a dark that was not quite night, hands moving because the hands had done this before. Her breathing was a metronome now, not to steady herself but to pace the rhythm of the job. The Met chimed with snatches of conversation, laying smoke, extraction options, coordinates for the Apaches. Captain Lou had worked to get airborne. The sound of rotors somewhere past the trees reached them like a promise. Torres, bandaged but bleeding, looked up toward the ridge and whispered, voice hoarse, "Who are you?" He tried to sit up to see the shooter who had become a life insurance policy. Falcon 9, Maya answered, voice low, because her badge did not need to be louder than the action. Hold, I've got you. Cole's voice cut through with something that had no rehearsal. Falcon 9, this is Lieutenant Cole. If we get out of this, buy me a beer. A small human thing in the middle of a storm, and Maya almost smiled at the absurdity. Make it a good one, she replied. You earned it. The enemy attempted one last push, a desperate surge that smelled of panic and the sour iron of poor planning. They broke against the uneven pressure of accurate fire and the sudden vertical of helicopters. The first Apache arrived like an answer thrown into the net, rotors chewing the rain into a white noise that shouted over ground noise. Hellfire and miniguns found targets with a born-in-the-dark precision, and the jungle returned to being quiet, the way a wound returns to being a scar. When the smoke lifted and the rotors faded, the SEALs stood in a different kind of silence, one edged with relief and the residue of adrenaline. Men hugged shoulders, hands rough and insistent. A medic counted pulses and cataloged survival. Cole keyed his radio, and the voice that came back had the simple art of gratitude ingrained into it. Falcon 9, This is Cole again. You saved my team. His words were not theatrical. They were true and small and enough. Maya looked at the ruin of the clearing through the scope one last time. Bodies littered spaces that had been green in the morning. Her hands felt like the hands of a woman who had borrowed violence to pay for life. She had broken an order and perhaps would pay for it when the paperwork unrolled and the lawyers in suits came to make sense of choices made in mud. For now, she swallowed the taste of gunpowder and the ache in her shoulders and keyed the mic. Copy, Lieutenant. Get everyone to the rally point. I'll cover the approach. Would you have pulled that trigger knowing it could end your career, but save 12 lives? In the operations center, the storm pressed against the canvas walls like a second heartbeat. Screens flickered green and amber. Radios stitched together conversations from a valley of rain. Captain Dana Liu stood over the comms rack, one hand on a headset, the other flat on a map whose edges had curled with humidity. The firing pattern on the feed made her pause, not the volume precision. A tempo that didn't waste a round. Leadership first, then heavy guns, then the hinge points where formations turned from push to scatter. It wasn't luck. It was doctrine, practiced and personal. Hold, she said to the tech hovering near her shoulder. Rewind 10 seconds. Slow it to a quarter. The screen blipped back. The audio became a broken drum. Shot half beat. Shot. A tuck of silence. Another shot. The spacing made a shape. She felt something old and familiar tug at memory. She dug for a roster that had no reason to be open on a day like this and opened it anyway. Attachments. Temporary duty orders. The list scrolled past with the indifference of a machine. Then one line caught her. Rourke, Maya, Staff Sergeant. MOS 11B Sniper, qualified. Call sign Falcon 9. She almost said the name out loud as if it would glue the pattern to the person. Instead, she asked the comms clerk, "Who's on Overwatch for Sierra 9 today?" "Army attachment," the clerk said, flipping a laminated card. Falcon 9. The room's sound changed for her, a filter sliding into place. She remembered a report from a valley with a name that still tasted like dust. Rumor, then confirmation, then cautionary story passed between officers as a question dressed like a legend. The one-eyed sniper. Not lost eye. No. The one who kept one eye in the scope for hours after her spotter died, refusing to blink when blinking meant losing men. The one who waited the length of a night and a lifetime to time a shot that gave a platoon a way out. Liu hadn't been there, but she had read the transcript and the casualty list and the line at the end that made the rest of the page feel smaller. Engagement concluded. Friendly forces exfiltrated. Spotter, KIA. Shooter remained on glass. Falcon 9. Wait, she said, stomach tightening. That's Staff Sergeant Maya Rourke? The clerk frowned. Ma'am, never mind, Liu said. She leaned into the radio and slid the frequency selector down one notch, then another. Kane's voice crackled on the net, brittle with outrage. Sergeant Rourke, stand down. That is a direct order. Liu's mind measured risk against fact. Risk was career-shaped. Fact was bleeding and spoke over a net with the tone of a lieutenant refusing to give up ground. She made her decision and reached for the override switch, a small toggle that didn't look like much until you needed it. The strip of yellow tape over it said, "Authorized use only." She lifted the edge of the tape and flipped the switch. Falcon 9, this is Liu, she said, voice clean and level in the ear cups. You have full engagement authority. The pause that followed was less than a second, but it held a life's worth of consequence. Then Maya's voice came back, low and unadorned. Copy that, ma'am. Kane snapped in on the secondary frequency before the clerk could mute him. Captain Liu, what do you think you? She cut him off without raising her voice. Major, we have accurate Overwatch confirming 50+ contacts. I am authorizing engagement under immediate defense of friendly forces and hostile intent. Your line is recorded. He sputtered, caught between anger and politics. The clerk stared at the table. The tech chewed the inside of his cheek like a man deciding whether to be brave or quiet. Liu kept her eyes on the map, until the red in her ears settled into the more useful red of focus. Outside, the rain changed from sheet to dagger. Inside the valley, the fight shifted on its hinge. The first Apache called in feet dry at 8 miles. 11 minutes, Lou thought, tracing a line from their racetrack pattern to the grid that was trying to become a funeral. 11 minutes could be a lifetime, or it could be bought by a rifle and a woman who did not need permission to breathe. The feed showed the reversible math of battle. Where a belt fed had pinned the SEALs, a single crack unpinned it. Where an RPG had made men small, a shot made an opening big enough to crawl through. She watched formation dissolve the way frost dissolves under a thumb. Not magic. Craft. Falcon 9, this is Lou, she said again. Apaches inbound, 11 minutes. Hold your men a corridor. Roger, Maya said. Corridor coming up. The words were simple. The work wasn't. The corridor happens when you remove the right bricks from a wall in the dark, with rain, while the wall is trying to kill you. Maya's pattern carved an invisible lane. She didn't shoot at everything. She shot at intent. The men who pointed, the men who lifted radios to their mouths, the men whose necklaces of bullets meant they were hinges, not doors. On the ground, the SEAL team began to breathe differently. The sound of commands found its cadence again. A medic's voice softened as he checked a pulse that wanted to bolt. Stay with me, someone else murmured. You're good, you're going home. Hope speaks that way when it's half sure. Kane tried once more to claw back control, but the net had learned to listen to the sounds that saved lives. He was a channel with the volume turned down by necessity, if not by switch. Lou felt sorry for him in a distant, administrative way. The way one feels for a man who never learned the difference between being in charge and being responsible. The thunder arrived before the rotor noise did. Then the sky announced the Apaches like a verdict. The valley soundscape tilted. The rain churned white under the blades. The pilots' voices carried a practiced calm that made the earth itself seem less certain of its threats. Rifle, one pilot said as a hellfire slipped into the trees and rode a line of light through the green. Guns, his wingman added, the word almost cheerful as the Mini opened a seam in a line of men that had, seconds earlier, believed in their numbers. The fight, which had been personal and close and ugly, suddenly acquired a distant hand. The mathematics of air shifted every equation at once. On Lou's screen, icons flickered from red to gray. The audio became a collage, Cole calling movements, a pilot calling egress, Maya marking a last target that might turn a retreat into a chase. Then, the Met exhaled, not victory, survival. Apaches RTB, the air controller said finally. Fields quieting. Copy, Lou said, and let herself sit down for the first time in an hour. Her knees popped and reminded her she was not the same age as the lieutenants. She took off the headset, and the world got louder in the wrong ways. Rain, a generator that needed love. Kane making promises about reports and chains of command. She set the headset down gently, as if it had ears. She checked her watch and the board. The rescue convoy had already rolled. She stepped outside the tent into rain that had softened into a wet insistence. The convoy would bring back men who would spend the next week remembering how to be quiet in rooms without gunfire. She would meet them at the ramp like she always did, clipboard in hand, eyes on faces. Hours later, the trucks nosed past the wire and exhaled men into yellow lamplight. Mud made the same noise on boots it always made. Someone laughed too loudly and then apologized. A medic walked with his hand still splayed like he wasn't finished holding a wound closed. Cole came down off the tailgate with the leaden grace of a man who had held himself together for others and could, now, afford to let gravity do its work. Lou watched him scan the yard until his eyes found a small figure kneeling by a bench at the far edge of the lights. Maya Rourke was smaller than the myth made her. Mud had mapped her sleeves and cheek. Her rifle lay across her lap in 3 careful pieces, wiped down to a dull sheen like a tool done with a hard day. Cole approached the way one approaches a memorial, not wanting to interrupt what it represents. He stopped a step away and cleared his throat, because it felt wrong to say a thank you like a transaction. "You're the one they said wasn't supposed to shoot," he said quietly. Maya didn't look up right away. She slid the bolt into the receiver and felt its seat, as satisfying as a door that finally hangs true. She glanced at him then, eyes steady and unreadable, and shrugged a shoulder. "Guess I missed that memo." He let out a laugh that wasn't laughter so much as release. He wiped a hand on a filthy pant leg and offered it. She looked at the hand, then took it. The shake was brief and solid, the kind of shake that seals something larger than the two people doing it. "Lieutenant Aaron Cole," he said, because even after chaos, introductions mattered. "Maya," she said, because some names didn't need rank to carry weight. Behind them, the convoy yard softened into vignettes. Men sitting on tailgates, heads bent together, a corpsman checking a bandage by the truck's red lamp, a driver staring at his hands like they'd done a new thing. Kane hovered near the TOC door with a folder under his arm like a shield. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The moment didn't belong to him. Captain Lou crossed the distance without ceremony. She looked from Cole to Maya and then at the rifle on Maya's lap. The engraving near the trigger guard caught the light like a whisper. R. Jensen, never miss twice. Lou didn't comment on it. She only noted the care with which the cloth moved over the metal. "Falcon 9, Lou said, voice level. "You kept them alive." Maya's eyes flicked to hers. "Apaches kept them alive, ma'am," she said. "Apaches finished it," Lou replied. "You kept the window open long enough to let them in." Kane arrived like weather nobody had planned for. He held his folder tighter as if it would give his words inertia. "Captain Lou," he said, "we'll need a formal statement. Rules were violated. There will be an inquiry." Lou didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on Maya. "There will be paperwork," she said evenly, more to Maya than to Kane. "There always is," Maya nodded once. She looked down at the rifle parts laid out like bones to be cleaned, then up at the trucks where men were dismounting with that slow confusion that comes after you find out you are not dead. "I can write," she said. Cole looked at Kane and then back to Maya as if choosing which world to remain in. "Whatever they write," he said softly, "doesn't change what happened out there." Maya gave him the smallest ghost of a smile. "What happened out there is why we're all in here." The yard shifted again into quiet industry gear being accounted for, weapons safed, medics moving in loops that didn't look like loops because they loved the work too much to let it look like repetition. Lou stepped back, giving the moment room to be itself. The rain relented to a mist. The generator coughed and caught its breath. Somewhere, a kettle boiled because a corporal believed in tea at bad hours. Cole stood there a second longer, as if he were memorizing the angle of a woman packing a rifle she had used to argue with death and win. He touched 2 fingers to the brim of his cap in a gesture that wasn't quite a salute and wasn't quite not. "Thank you," he said. Maya's answer was the sound of a bolt sliding home, clean and certain, a punctuation mark to a sentence only she had the right to finish. The hangar smelled like jet fuel and wet canvas. Rain drummed on the metal roof in long, steady lines, the kind that made voices sound smaller. Rows of folding chairs faced a dented lectern, and a projector threw the word DE brief across a wrinkled screen as if the word itself were tired. Maya sat 3 seats from the back, hands folded, rifle nowhere in sight. She wore a clean uniform with sleeves unrolled and rank sharp at the edge. The mug of coffee someone had given her went cold before she remembered to drink it. She watched the doors, not because she was waiting for anyone, but because that's what habits do when given the chance. The SEAL team filed in together. Not in formation closer than that. They moved like men who had shared an hour they didn't yet know how to name. Lieutenant Aaron Cole took a seat 2 rows ahead, but for a long moment he didn't sit. He scanned the hangar the way he had scanned the tree line, then found her and gave a small nod. She returned it, almost imperceptible. Major Robert Kane arrived with a folder tucked under his arm and a tightness around the mouth that had nothing to do with the weather. He spoke to the staff judge advocate at a volume meant to be overheard. Words like insubordination, clear violation, and undermine command integrity made tidy shapes in the air, as if tidy shapes could change the shape of a night. The screen clicked uselessly. A tech banged the side of the projector and got an image that sloshed like a reflection in a puddle. Chairs creaked, boots scuffed. The rain did not care. Kane stepped to the lectern and lifted his chin a fraction. "This is a formal debrief," he announced. "We will adhere to procedure. We will also address breaches of protocol that occurred during the operation." He let the last sentence sit, a hook thrown into a room that did not want fishing. Captain Dana Liu stood near the wall, hands behind her back, face unreadable. When Kane glanced her way, she did not look down. The clerk beside her held a clipboard close, as if paper could be a shield. Kane launched into a summary that was less a summary than a plea for a certain version of the night. He described weather anomalies and signal interference. He described intel confidence intervals. He described risk matrices as though men hadn't bled in shapes that don't fit matrices. Every so often he used "I" in a sentence that should have used "we," and every so often he used "we" in a sentence that should have used "they." During the engagement, he said finally, voice crisp, Sergeant Maya Rourke, temporary Army attachment, violated direct orders to remain in an observational role. She engaged without authorization, thereby assuming unlawful initiative in a joint environment. I will be recommending disciplinary action and... A chair scraped. The sound was soft, but the room pivoted toward it. Aaron Cole had stood. He didn't interrupt with words, he interrupted with posture, the kind that says a man is done being seated while someone lies to his memory. Kane frowned. "Lieutenant, you will have the opportunity to speak." "Understood," Cole said. He sat again, not because he'd been told to, but because he'd made the point he wanted to make, that truth was in the room and would not stay quiet forever. Kane lifted the folder, opened it like a curtain, and turned toward Maya. Sergeant Rourke stepped forward. She rose without clatter. Her boots made a clean sound on the concrete, a metronome for a heart that did not need one. She stopped at the edge of the light thrown by the projector, a half halo making her ribbon bar look like an argument someone forgot to have. "This command," Kane said, the word thick with possession, "cannot function if operators decide on their own when orders apply. Your actions." The side door banged open. Colonel Henry Cole walked in with rain on his shoulders and a pace that made space for only one kind of conversation. The room snapped to a respectful quiet that was different from fear. He did not come in with a storm, he parted one. "Major," he said, not loud, just inevitable, "you're relieved." "Effective immediately." Kane blinked. "Sir?" "Relieved," the colonel repeated, letting the syllables land. "Turn over your notes to Captain Liu. Step outside. Wait with the provost marshal." Silence swallowed the hangar. 100 thoughts happened in 100 heads, but no one made a sound. Kane's face went the color of bad paper. He looked at the folder, at Liu, at the colonel, at the SEALs whose eyes had gone flat and very clear. He started to say something, then thought better of it. He handed the folder to Liu with fingers that did not want to let go and walked toward the door, each step an argument he was losing 1 foot at a time. 2 MPs met him on the threshold with the kind of courtesy that has edges. The door closed with a soft gust of rain and a finality that made the projector's hum sound suddenly small. Colonel Cole turned to the room and took in faces, the tired, the bandaged, the ones who had gone quiet because they were having to learn again how to be alive. He let the moment breathe once, then faced Maya. "Sergeant," he said, and the word was a salute all by itself. "You saved 12 Americans. That's not disobedience, that's honor." The sentence hung in the air like a flag that finds wind when it needs it most. Something moved through the SEAL ranks, no whisper, no order. Men rose, one after another, the sound of boots on concrete echoing under the metal roof. Chairs scraped back in a rhythm that matched the rain. They stood in a line that wasn't tidy and was perfect anyway. Then the salute came, not a snap, not a show, but a single clean movement that traveled down the row like a wave discovering a shore. The hangar went so quiet that the small sounds got big. The ping of cooling metal somewhere in the rafters, a drip finding a crack, the soft intake of a medic's breath. Maya did not flinch from it. She stood where she was, spine straight, chin level, and accepted something she had not asked for. Aaron Cole stepped forward into the open space between the rows and the lectern. He did not carry notes. He carried a knight. He stopped a pace from her and spoke in a voice worn down to the truth. "We were 1 minute from being overrun when your rifle cut the silence," he said. "You didn't just save us, you reminded us what right looks like." He didn't extend a hand this time. He didn't need to. The words were an oath he'd taken before, in a different form, and he took it again now, with witnesses. Maya's throat worked once, but she kept her voice even. "I did my job, sir." "You did more than that," he said. The colonel looked to Liu. "Captain." Liu stepped forward with the folder Kane had surrendered. She opened it and slid out a single page that did not look like a charge sheet. "On behalf of the Joint Task Force," she read, "commendation is entered into the record for Captain Dana Liu for decisive action under combat conditions, for assuming responsibility commensurate with the facts on the ground, and for authorizing engagement that preserved American lives." The room did not applaud. It didn't have to. Liu inclined her head a fraction and then looked to Maya. The captain's eyes were tired and proud and something like relieved. The colonel continued, voice steady. "An administrative review of Major Kane's decisions is underway. Interim findings indicate a pattern of dismissing field intelligence, contributing to unnecessary risk. That review will proceed outside this room. What belongs to this room is acknowledgement." He turned to the SEALs. "You wrote your names twice last week, once on the roster, once in the way you stood for each other. That is the definition of a unit." He turned back to Maya. "And you, Sergeant Rourke, wrote yours where too few are willing to, in the space between an order and a life." The tech at the projector shifted his weight, and the screen flickered, then stilled on a still frame captured from drone feed. It showed a corridor cut through chaos, a sliver of ground where movement had been possible because someone had removed the pieces that made it impossible. No one narrated it. No one needed to. A young petty officer in the back, bandage peeking from under his sleeve, lifted his chin and said into the quiet, "Hoo-yah." It wasn't loud, but it had the weight of agreement. Others echoed it, low and short, not to rattle the rafters, but to set something in place where all could see it. Maya felt the heat rise behind her eyes and willed it to stay put. Tears had their time. This wasn't it. She breathed once, the way she did before a trigger took up slack, and let the air settle. The colonel closed the folder with a soft tap. "We'll complete the debrief per protocol," he said. "You'll write statements. There will be diagrams and timelines. You'll hate all of it. Do it anyway. We owe clarity to the next team that steps into a jungle that thinks it has the last word." He looked one more time at Maya. "But understand this, there are things paperwork cannot hold. This is one of them." Kane reappeared in the doorway then, not entering, just hovering like a footnote that had lost its sentence. The MPs stood a step behind him, patient and impersonal. He looked at the line of men still standing and at Maya, who hadn't moved. Whatever words he had rehearsed died somewhere in the wet air between him and the room. He turned away. The MPs did not touch him. They didn't need to. Liu approached Maya after the formalities thinned, and the hum of the hangar remembered how to be a hum. She kept her voice soft. "You up for a walk to the clinic?" she asked. "Doc wants to check your shoulder. You've been holding that arm like it made you angry." Maya blinked, surprised. "Didn't notice." "That's why we have medics," Liu said. Then, after a beat, "And why we have you." They walked past the rows of chairs together. The SEALs stepped aside, giving them a lane without being told to. One after another, men met Maya's eyes. Not all of them spoke. The ones who did kept it simple. "Thanks, Sergeant. See you on the range." "You got impeccable timing, ma'am. Next time we'll bring the beer." Ridicule had burned off in the heat of reality. Realization had hardened into respect. Respect, left alone long enough, had turned into something quieter and heavier reverence, not for a person on a pedestal, but for a choice that clarified everyone's oath. At the door, Aaron Cole caught up to them. He didn't intrude, he matched their pace. "There's a thing my dad used to say," he offered, staring straight ahead. says there are two kinds of silence. The kind that means you've got nothing to say, and the kind that means you said the thing that mattered without words. Lou glanced at him. Which was last night? The second kind, he said. He looked at Maya. You cut the jungle with it. She didn't answer, and he didn't need her to. Outside, the rain had calmed to a mist that clung to eyelashes and collars. The runway lights made halos in the wet. A helicopter sat with its blades tied down, a beast leashed between storms. Somewhere, a radio played a song too soft to place, the melody a thread that didn't break. Behind them, inside the hangar, paperwork already began its slow tidal work. Statements would be written. Arrows would be drawn on maps. Times would be argued by men who had forgotten how long a second can be. In the margin of one report, a clerk would jot with a pencil too small to be useful. Outcome: 12 Americans alive. In the clinic hallway, a corpsman waited with a cuff and a kind smile that didn't broaden into cheer. He took Maya's blood pressure and made a face that said he wasn't surprised. You'll sleep eventually, he murmured. Not today. Soon. Soon, she echoed. Lou touched her elbow. There will be more questions, she warned. Maya nodded. There always are, and there will be answers. Those too, Maya said. They stood for a moment without speaking, the corridor's hum filling the spaces as if conversation needed a scaffold. Lou tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so human it collapsed the ranks between them for a heartbeat. You're not alone here, Lou said. Maya looked past the captain to the hangar doors, where the seals still lingered in a loose flock, not ready to scatter. I know, she said. The rain tapered to nothing. Somewhere, the sun considered a break in the clouds. The day moved forward because days do. What it carried with it from the hangar was simple and unadorned, a room that had learned the difference between following and leading, and the sound of boots rising in salute when the right person walked through the fire and came out carrying all the names. The Georgia air carried that dry, red clay scent that never quite left Fort Benning. Heat shimmered above the rifle range, beyond the targets. Pines swayed in slow formation. Staff Sergeant Maya Rourke stood behind a row of prone cadets, the brim of her cap shading eyes that still knew how to measure distance by instinct. Their rifles cracked in uneven rhythm, young hands chasing steadiness. Breathe, don't chase the trigger, she said quietly, and half a dozen shoulders eased at once. She moved between them, correcting elbows, nudging boots, softening panic with calm. A generation learning precision from someone who had already paid for it. One cadet, barely 20, rolled onto his elbow and looked up. Ma'am, can I ask something? Ask, how did you know you were right to break the order that night? The question floated there, innocent, heavy. The others paused their breathing, waiting. Maya looked through a spotting scope toward the horizon. Heat distorted the air, turning the targets into ghosts. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she spoke, voice low enough that they leaned in to catch it. You never know, she said. You just trust your eyes and your conscience. The scope stayed steady. The world, for a heartbeat, seemed to agree. Later that afternoon, the story the cadets whispered was one she never told herself. But miles away, the echoes still moved through other lives. Lieutenant Aaron Cole came home to North Carolina, greeted by a little girl in rain boots who didn't know she'd nearly grown up without a father. He knelt in the driveway, helmet still in hand, and she ran straight into his arms. His wife's tears hit his shoulder with the same rhythm as the rain had that night. Petty Officer Torres, his shoulder rebuilt with pins and steel, sat in a hospital garden writing a letter to the sniper who saved him. He didn't know what address to send it to, so he left it unmailed, tucked between pages of a Bible he now carried everywhere. Captain Dana Lou received a commendation she hadn't sought. She kept it folded in a drawer because a plaque couldn't explain the sound of choosing to override an order when the air smelled like smoke and rain. And somewhere in Montana, a small envelope arrived at an old ranch mailbox, no return address, just 12 signatures on a card that read, "For seeing what we couldn't." On the range, the cadets packed up gear, laughter breaking the afternoon heat. Maya lingered, letting the quiet settle. She knelt, brushed a thumb across the stock of her rifle, feeling the engraving with the same reverence some people gave to prayer. R. Jensen, never miss twice. The setting sun turned the glass of her scope into gold. She adjusted it once more and aimed at nothing, just to remind herself that peace had its own target. Her thoughts drifted to the jungle, the smell of gunpowder and wet leaves, the sudden hush after the Apaches. She remembered the silence that followed and how it wasn't empty. It was filled with lives that had refused to stop breathing. Some orders protect rank, others protect lives. That night, she had chosen the latter, and 12 men went home because of it. Maya stood, brushing red dust from her knees. The sound of another instructor calling for ceasefire rolled down the line. Young soldiers straightened, rifles cleared, bolts locked. She smiled a little at the discipline, the hope, the unfinished courage in them. The narrator's voice, the one every soldier keeps, spoke somewhere deep inside her, the same way the wind speaks through a flag before dawn. The strongest soldiers aren't the loudest in the room. They're the ones who act when silence could cost lives. Maya slung her rifle, turned toward the barracks, and walked off the range as the sun dipped low, her shadow long, her conscience quiet, and the world for once at ease. The camera fades to a still shot of the jungle clearing, steam rising from the rain-soaked ground, a single rifle casing glinting in the mud beneath broken branches. The sound of rain softens, replaced by a heartbeat silence. They mocked her, doubted her, silenced her, until the night her rifle spoke for her. She didn't break the rules. She rewrote what courage looks like. The frame lingers on the casing, then fades to black as distant thunder rolls. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more military and veteran stories. These true stories keep the courage alive for generations to come. Salute in the comments for every soldier who chose right when it wasn't easy.